Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next video. So sorry guys that I haven't been uploading so frequently lately. I've just had a lot going on, but I'm gonna try to be uploading more. And yeah, hope you guys are enjoying the video so far. Make sure to hit the like button. If you have enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss another one of my videos. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my comrades channel, Growling Zeus 666. So I know that that was kind of early to do. So today in this video we're gonna be talking about we're going to be continuing our in-depth analysis of the most competitive elections, Senate elections this year, the most competitive elections of 2022. We've already done 4 states. We have done Utah, Wisconsin, Ohio, and New Hampshire. As you can see, I've moved Ohio and New Hampshire into the likely columns for either party. So that will, and I'll talk about that more in my next prediction next week. But today we're going to be going to our first southern battleground state. The most interesting, I guess you could say, the most sleepery of them in terms of a potential flip for the Democrats, and that is the state of North Carolina. So North Carolina this year, it's an open race. We've got Republican Congressman Ted Budd up against former Democratic North Carolina Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, actually, Cheri Beasley. And this is a surprisingly competitive race. Now, North Carolina is typically competitive, but it almost always leans towards the Republican Party. In 2020, Trump won the state by 1 point, despite Biden being up in the polling average. Same in 2016, Trump won it by actually 4 points. In 2012, Romney won it by 2. The last time that a Democrat won North Carolina on the presidential level was in 2008. This was really when North Carolina became that battleground state that we know it as today. Obama won the state by, a hair against John McCain. But as you can see, back in 2004, Bush won the state by 12, and you can see that it wasn't too competitive. Going back to 1976, which was the last time before '08 in which Democrats won the state, with Jimmy Carter, of course, a Southerner from the South. That was a no-brainer. But you can see Republicans had pretty much comfortably won the state in 19 in the Ross Perot and Clinton years. It was a little close, but even Dole won the state by 5 points in 1996. So North Carolina has really become competitive more recently. It is one of the fastest growing states and now has 16 electoral votes in the Electoral College. Um, One of those southern states that a lot of people are going back to, or a lot of liberals and Democratic voters are moving into, and that has made the state a little bit bluer. It also has to do with black turnout and the fact that North Carolina is a pretty diverse state. It has a very large African American population. But polls in North Carolina almost always overestimate Democrats. Let's look at the polling average now between Budd and Beasley. We've got it, Budd on average leads by about 1.5 points. And as you can see, if we go back to 2020 in the state, you can see that Biden was up by zero point 0.6 on election day. He had won almost every single poll against Trump. And what was even more surprising is in the concurrent Senate race, Tom Tillis won. Now, Tom Tillis is, of course, the incumbent Republican from the other Senate seat, and he won by 2 points, despite Cal Cunningham, his Democratic opponent, being up by 3 points almost in the polling average. He had won almost every single poll in the state. Only a couple got it right, like Trafalgar was pretty much the only pollster that got it right, actually. And of course, there was a sexting scandal between, but there was Cal Cunningham did have a sexting scandal, which was revealed about a month before the election. But I think a large part of North Carolina's problems is, Democrats' problems with winning North Carolina has to do with black turnout, as of course you've seen. White voters, or a lot of these Democratic Senate nominees have been white. And presidential nominees. You can go back to 2016. Richard Burr was in a very competitive race against Deborah K. Ross. He ended up winning by 6 points. And I think, the fact that Democrats have been nominating, white candidates, white men, white women, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's bad for them in North Carolina because it kind of it doesn't really, you know, motivate black voters to come out for them. So let's, get into the actual specifics of this race. I know that this is kind of a wonky video for a start, but let's get into the actual statistics of the race, why it's an open race, and let's talk about who the incumbent is. So the incumbent is Republican Richard Burr, who was the one that I just mentioned back in 2016. He was first elected in 2004 when when John Edwards, who was running for president with John Kerry, decided to retire. And he's been a pretty strong force in the state. In 2010, he won by 12 points. This was the largest margin for a Republican in North Carolina in a Senate election, and I think decades, maybe even the best. Let's look. So Burr's 55% also represented the highest vote share a North Carolina Republican received since the state began directly electing its senators. Yeah, so he was pretty strong in 2010, which was a red wave year. Democrats really didn't try to target North Carolina that year. And as you can see, going back to 2008, Elizabeth Dole, of course, the wife of the late Senator Bob Dole, God rest his soul, lost to Kay Hagan in the concurrent Senate election with the presidential race. And yeah, and so Hagan was able, despite her being white, she was able to do very well in the rural areas, and it being a blue wave year, and Dole's unpopularity and kind of running a bad campaign. I think that she said something along the lines of, trying to accuse Hagan, who was a Presbyterian, of being an atheist or something, which, that was pretty stupid. So she lost pretty big. And so yeah, so you can see Hagan pretty much dominated these counties, in a lot of the rural areas. Dole didn't do terribly, but Hagan was able to really run up the numbers. And in 2014, Hagan was in a pretty tough position against Tom Tillis when he was running for his first, when she was running for a second term. She was expected to win according to polling, but she actually ended up losing to Tillis by about the same, by about 2 points. And so yeah, that was a pretty big upset. Tom Tillis has really been able to surprise us. Of course, I don't need to tell you guys about 2020. So yeah, what happened is, at 2016, when Richard Burr was in that pretty competitive Senate election, he said that if he was reelected to or he said basically that 2016 was going to be his last run for elected office in his lifetime, and he ended up winning. So it was automatically he was planning a retirement in 2022. And he hasn't backtracked on that yet, and of course he's not going to. I mean, if he was going to run, he would have already announced, and he would have won the primary and everything. So, yeah. But anyways, there was a pretty competitive Republican primary to replace him. There was talk about Laura Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, from running for this seat. She lives in North Carolina, but she decided not to run. So what ended up happening was former Governor Pat McCrory, who had lost to Roy Cooper in 2016 despite Trump winning the state, decided to run, and he was kind of seen as, a red flag for Republicans in the state. They thought that he would probably lose the general. And I agree with that. I think Cheri Beasley would have won, or would be winning a lot, big, if McCrory was in fact the Republican nominee. But the main candidate, the candidate that Trump endorsed after it was announced that Laura Trump wasn't running. I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak through. Well, I don't have my Invisalign on right now, but I guess it's kind of unusual for my teeth right now to be speaking like this much without it. So the nominee that they chose was Ted Budd, who is a Republican congressman from North Carolina's 13th congressional district. And what ended up happening is that Trump endorsed Budd about a year before the primary, and it was still pretty competitive. You can see Pat McCrory was pretty much destroying Ted Budd and a lot of these pollsters, but as you can see, back around March of 2022, Bud really started to take off, and by the end of it, he was pretty much leading big in, all of these pollsters, and it was pretty clear that Bud was going to be the Republican nominee. He ended up winning the nomination by about, almost, by 36 points. Or 34 points. It was a very big margin across the state. I think, yeah, McCrory only won this one county. I'm not exactly sure which one that is, but yeah. Uh, Yeah, so Ted Budd pretty much destroyed Pat McCrory, and that was a good sign for Republicans. That kind of said that, oh, this race is over. And the fact that the national environment was so good for Republicans made Democrats kind of say, screw it, we're not going to focus on North Carolina. We have a good candidate there in Cheri Beasley, who kind of cleared the field for the Democrats and won the primary big. But she, was kind of seen as a sacrificial lamb because while she was a good candidate, Republicans nominated the right candidate in this race. And as you can see, polling, throughout the spring and, throughout the early spring, from the spring, pretty much showed that was the case. Right after Ted Budd won the primary, he was pretty much surging in all of these pollsters. Cheri Beasley might win a couple here and there, but it really didn't start to look too troubling for Ted Budd until this Trafalgar poll came out, which is pretty accurate in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is one of the states where Trafalgar is a lot more accurate. They only showed Ted Budd up by 3. And then all of a sudden, Cheri Beasley has this surge in the polls around late July and early August, or to mid-August, and it really started, to come to my attention. I remember when I put out my Senate prediction in the middle of August, kind of saying, look at North Carolina, something, is happening there. I don't think Cheri Beasley is going to win, but she's certainly doing a lot better. And I think that the argument for Ted Budd, has to, winning this and outperforming polling has to do with the fact that in 2020, Cal Cunningham was leading in all those polls, yet he still lost. But Cheri Beasley, being a black woman, can get good turnout from the urban black areas, like Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, those kinds of areas, the big areas in North Carolina. Ted Budd is good for the rural areas, but he really does seem to be kind of slacking off. There's been some reports of him, kind of taking the summer off and not really talking to people. Sorry about that. So yeah, Ted Budd was kind of slacking off in this Senate race, and Cheri Beasley has had a lot of time to kind of put her message out on the airwaves. She's kind of positioned herself as more of a moderate. And the thing about North Carolina is that Democrats do well in statewide races, or in localized races, and Cheri Beasley's really trying to become more of that. Is trying to really localize this campaign. Democrats nationally haven't done too well in North Carolina, but on the statewide level, they, do fairly well. As you can see in 2020, Roy Cooper, despite being a white man, was able to do very well against, the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forest. He won by 5 points. And North Carolina's governorship, yes, has been, very solid for Democrats throughout the years. Pat McCrory was pretty much the only Republican governor of North Carolina in quite some time. But as you can see, North Carolina is a state that is willing to elect Democrats on the statewide level, and if, they distance themselves from the national party. And Cheri Beasley is trying to do that. North Carolina hasn't really gotten a lot of attention, and I think that's for a reason. I think that Cheri Beasley is intentionally doing that so that she has a better chance at winning this race because she knows that on the statewide level and local level, in governor elections and Supreme Court elections, the Democrats can do very well. It's just the national party really hurts them in the state with those swing voters, and also the fact that they've been putting up a lot of white nominees for Senate, and the presidency really doesn't help them. So yeah, and North Carolina, I think, is a state that is still going to go to Ted Budd. I put it as a lean Republican state as of right now, but I will, just out of caution for a polling error. But I will say that Cheri Beasley has impressed me. The fact that she's doing so well in the polling data, and the fact that she, can turn out a lot of black voters. The Democrats have been struggling in North Carolina, and it's not necessarily that they don't win the black vote. The fact is that they don't get enough black turnout. And Cheri Beasley, being a black woman and having, barely lost her Supreme Court race in 2020, it really helps her out a ton. And I don't mean like a Biden loss of 1 point. I'm talking like a 0.004%, loss to her opponent. It was like 400 votes. It was a 400 vote loss or something insanely close like that. We can pull it up right. We can pull it up right now. Here we go. 2020 North Carolina elections, judicial elections. I should have this pulling up before. It says yeah, as you can see, yeah, it was 0.008 It was a 0.008% margin for Paul Martin Newbury. Cheri Beasley was the incumbent, and she was leading in most of these polls. Yes, she still lost, but as you can see, she did so well. And the argument that 2022 is a redder year, which I do believe, even though I don't think it's a red wave year anymore, makes people say, well, she couldn't even win in 2020, how is she going to win in 2022? And that's fair, but you also have to remember that, considering Trump not being at the top of the ballot, that's not going to help Democrats in North Carolina. And, the fact that she came so close, she only lost by 401 votes. Look at how close this margin was, and look at how well she did in some of these areas, in some of these, urban areas, a lot better than Biden did. You can see that North Carolina is absolutely a flippable state for Democrats, and I have said that it was kind of one of their reach states before. I, kind of said Pennsylvania is the most likely, Wisconsin is the second most likely, then North Carolina, then Ohio, and then Florida, and that was kind of, those were really the top five flips that I would say are, somewhat attainable for Democrats, but, Ohio and Florida realistically are not going to be attainable. So right now I have North Carolina as a lean Republican state out of caution. I think Ted Budd is a strong candidate, and I do think that Cheri Beasley is going to lose in the end, but the fact that she has done so well in some of these polls, and the fact that she has done, that her, localized campaign, the fact that she's running a more localized campaign, and that, Democrats, possibly are purposely, you know, not paying attention to North Carolina so that Cheri Beasley can do her thing, is going to help her. And I think the black turnout's going to soar for her. And I do think that she can win. I think that this is an underrated flip for the Democrats. I don't think, just out of caution, I'm going to put it as a lean Republican seat, but I could see this going into a toss up. I could see myself moving this into a toss up race if we really start to see some more polls that show the race very, very close. We already see polls showing the race, pretty much in a dead heat. Emerson has Ted Budd up by 3. I think that the problem for Cheri Beasley is the fact that a lot of these polls that show her up have large margin of errors. Um, you know, have large, yeah, and the fact that there are a lot of undecided voters. So we're just gonna have to see and wait. But Ted Budd is doing, fairly a lot worse than he should be in North Carolina. I think that this is an underrated flip for Democrats. And here is the county map. Of course, yeah, we have all the states that we've already filled in for the other Senate races. And in North Carolina, I think that it's going to be pretty much the same map as 2020, but I do think that Beasley will do a lot better in the urban areas, and that will help her. I think that Ted Budd might do slightly better in some of the rural areas. I think that it'll be pretty much the same result as 2020. I think it'll be about a 1 or 2 point margin. But I, would not be surprised if we wake up on November 9th and we see that North Carolina has flipped back to Democrats because remember, Obama was the last black president. He was the last Democrat to win North Carolina. Yes, he lost it in 2012, but the fact that he was able to win it in 2008 after it voted, for George W. Bush by 12 points 4 years prior really says something about how far North Carolina has gone to the left. It's a left trending state, and I think that it really can, surprise us in the end. Right now, I think Ted Budd's favored, but I would not be surprised if Cheri Beasley can actually pull this off. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Share it, turn on notifications so you don't miss another one of my videos. Check out my main channel, Interactor127, my non-political channel, and my comrades channel, Growlingzoo666. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.